My name is Marc Metzer from Metzer Farms. We're a duck and goose hatchery in Gonzales, which is Central Coast, California. My dad started the hatchery basically the day after he graduated from here at UC Davis, his animal science degree. And he said the day of graduation, there's a local guy around here that taught him how to sex ducks to determine if it's male or female after they hatch. So, and then he started Metzer Farms. So we've been doing that ever since. I'm here to talk about just some basics of waterfowl, raising them commercially for small farmers. Please ask questions along the way, and people that are out there in the webinar, we'll have moderators here that can ask the question for you, so just type away. I'm going to cover commercial breeds, water, bedding or litter, housing, how much space you need, the basics of nutrition, egg washing, processing for meat, and marketing. I'm just going to lightly touch on all of these subjects. So you're going to have to do a lot more research in figuring out how you are going to do it, but these are important topics for you to consider. You can also email me if you have questions as you go. Okay, so commercial waterfowl, ducks and geese. Ducks for meat production, the main one is pekin. That's by far the most common one used. Most chefs are used to cooking that one. And then you have the Muscovy. That is popular in very, very fancy restaurants, but still pekin dominates the United States. France, I think, is the only country that Muscovy has a higher production than pekin. So pekin, you're gonna process it about 7 or 12 weeks of age, and Muscovy is 12 weeks of age. If you're looking for duck egg production, there's the 3 main breeds are Khaki Campbell, and then white layer, golden 300. Those are just a hybrid, and then a pekin. So the first 3 are going to get you the highest egg production. The Khaki Campbell will be a little bit smaller egg. The white layer and the golden 300 will be a average size egg, and the pekin will produce a bigger egg. A general rule is the bigger the egg, or the bigger the bird, the bigger the egg, and also the more feed you have to put into it to get that egg. So that's something you'll have to budget for. It's going to take more feed to make a pekin egg than a Khaki Campbell egg, but you're going to get a lot bigger egg. And then for goose meat production, the Emden is the goose that's commonly used for meat production. I put in there brown and white Chinese because those, it's a smaller goose, and that's what the Chinese population likes, at least in California. And I think that that's a big untapped market in the United States. Goose for Chinese people. In China, it is huge industry. They eat a ton of it per capita, and nobody that I know of grows it year round in the United States, and it's just some people do it seasonally. I think there's good opportunity for that. So if you live in a big city with a Chinatown or Asian population, I think it's worth researching. So pictures, top left, that's flock Emden, top right, pekin, bottom right, Muscovy, bottom left, those are Khaki Campbell. Okay, water. This is water for drinking. So you can do a nipple, bellwater trough, or a pond. I recommend nipple waters. They're going to be by far keep the cleanest and without things getting too muddy. Ducks do not need water to swim. Some people prefer it, but it's not a requirement. I added in a picture on the bottom left. That's a, it connects to a nipple line, and it's supposedly supposed to allow ducks to drop their head into water completely. We put these in our pens, and they just drink from the top. They didn't even dunk their whole head, and it caused for a big muddy mess. But maybe you could train your ducks to dunk their head in there. I don't know. Okay, so this is the picture I took today. Actually, it's a nipple water line that we put outside, and so all I do is I get a bucket with a float valve, and so that's how I control the pressure going into the nipple line. And then I can connect rows of nipple lines. The thing I like about this is it's movable, so you can move it if it gets too muddy underneath those nipple lines. Do not connect nipple lines to your well pressure or city pressure. It's too high, the nipple lines are going to leak, and there's going to be so much pressure pushing down on the nipple, they're not going to be able to press up on it and release lots of amount of water. So you have to have a water regulator. Another advantage, it's cleaner. It's straight water that they're drinking. It's not water that they're getting muddy. You can add things to the water if you want through the bucket, if you want to vaccinate them or add different vitamins. If you can hang them above slats, if you dig a little pit and put a flat slats in there, that's another way to decrease the amount of mud. So one of the disadvantages is when it freezes, they can break. So what we do if we know it's going to freeze at night, we open up one nipple at the very end of the line, connect the hose to it, and let it just run slowly throughout the night, and then it doesn't allow the water to freeze. Questions? All right. This is a bellwater. As you can see, it's on a wooden structure that we built, same one that we used to hang the nipple lines. All of our geese used to be on red waters, and we are slowly migrating to the nipple waters. The main reason the water is so much cleaner when we're using the nipple lines. They will eat and go straight to the water and get it all dirty. So those red waters should be cleaned out almost daily, or they could be, because dirt just sinks to the bottom of them. And then the outside, water flows down the outside of the red water from the top of the red water, and that algae starts to grow. And that needs to be scrubbed off. So, and in this picture, you can see the slats. So that's actually a 6-foot pit under those slats, and we lined it with plastic. And then we're able to pump out the liquid. That's more work, but that's just how we were doing it. They still can have a freezing problem because there's a 3/8-inch tubing that goes to feed the red waters, so those could break. So that's another option for waterfowl. And then a pond or a trough. It's difficult to clean a pond or a trough. You have to do something with all that water. Different studies show that if you're doing it for meat production, they're not going to gain nearly as much weight as quickly if they have bathing water. And I think it's just they're gonna spend more time in there than growing and eating. Contamination is definitely a problem, especially if you have a lot of ducks. If it's not netted in, you risk a bigger pond could bring in wild waterfowl, and there's a lot of diseases that can you could risk getting with wild waterfowl. Bedding. So different options for bedding. Wood shavings, top right picture, peat moss, chopped straw, rice hulls, wood pellets, and chop corn husks. We use wood shavings. That's what works best for us. But there's all different types of bedding that you can do. I think the main thing is you do what's best for you, what you can source locally. I was in Missouri and they were using corn husks for goose bedding, and that's because they had cornfields. I think they chop up the corn husks. That's not something I could use in Sills Valley. We just switched within a year from bulk shavings to bag shavings. It's actually cheaper to do bag shavings. We had been doing bulk forever. Our bulk shaving supplier said that they didn't want to drive to our location anymore, and we did some research and found out bag shavings were way better for us. The reason for us, our ducks are in big barns. We don't have to drive a tractor down the middle of the barn full of loose shavings. You don't have to load that tractor trailer with shavings. We just add shavings wherever it's wet in the pen. You don't have to do the whole barn. And then we just started using the wood pellets. It's like sawdust that's pelletized, and you throw it out there, and within a day, the pellet kind of breaks apart and starts sucking in moisture. I first learned about those 2 years ago when I went to France to visit some duck farms. So in France, workers get paid overtime if they work Saturday and Sunday. So what they do is they use chopped straw Monday through Thursday, and then Friday they use the wooden pellets because it gets them through the weekend. So that's kind of goes back to use whatever bedding is best for you. Okay, it is cheaper for them to pay for the wood pellets and not have to pay people overtime to throw other types of bedding. Ducks are wet, so you're going to continually top dress the litter. If you have them in a barn, even if you take them out during the day and you bring them in at night, you're going to have to continually add shavings to the top of the bedding. For example, our geese, we found out for their nest, we do a layer of straw, shavings, straw, shavings. If it was only straw or only shavings, it didn't work out. They would break through it, or they would just ruin the nest. But for whatever reason, they like the combination. And another one is no bedding at all, and you just move the coop every day, or once a week if the coop's big enough. Okay, housing and space or density. There's all different types for all different types of waterfowl or poultry. Brooding is something that you're going to want to spend extra time thinking about and working on getting a good brooder. You could do enclosed housing, so they're in a barn all day. Day range, they're in a barn at night, they're let out during the day. A mobile coop where, like in the picture, it's moved maybe once a week. Some people move a coop every day to fresh grass. A mobile coop in range. So this picture is actually a mobile coop, and you see the ducks outside, so they're ranging, and then they'll put them inside at night. And then you can just do full pasture, where they don't have a coop or a house to go into. So for example, our geese, they don't have a coop or a house. They're outside 24 hours, 365 days, except for brooding. Again, birds can't regulate their body temperature at a young age. You have to spend, that's gonna be one of the things that you need to manage closely is the brooding. I learned a lot about housing through APPA, A-P-P-P-A, American Pasture Poultry Producers Association. I went to the conference last week in Texas. I recommend you all to join, and possibly you can go to the conference. It's really cool. You learn a lot. Brooding is vital. Give them more food and more water than they need, so that even if they're blind, they could walk into it or run into it. You don't want them to be blind. I'm just saying that's how much you want out there, so they can't miss it. Make sure it's cleaned out before you put in new birds. Temperature, you want the room to be 80 degrees, 90 degrees under the heat lamp. You don't want to go over 90 degrees. Make sure there's dry bedding, dry litter, and continually add dry bedding and dry litter daily. Lights, the first 2 days to the first 7 days, you could leave 24 hours of light, and that just makes sure that they find the water, they find the food. And then what we do is we decrease it an hour every day until we get 17 hours of light. If you don't want to give them any artificial light, you just decrease it every day until you get to the natural light. What we do for our layers is we give them 17 hours of light their whole life. Okay, that works the best for egg layers. So basically, we're turning the lights on before the sun comes up. We're turning them off when the sun comes up, because we have natural light coming in. And then at the end of the day, again, we turn the lights on before the sun goes down, and then we turn them off after a couple hours. As the seasons change, daylight changes, so you're constantly having to change your time clocks of when the lights turn on and off. Density, it's recommended 15 ducklings per 10 square feet at that young age. And then at about 3 weeks, that's when you can really open up your range or building and allow them a lot more room. The more birds you have in any given area, the wetter it's going to get, and the more bedding you're going to have to use, and the more management it's going to take. So you kind of have to consider that versus the cost of how big of a brooder you want, or how big of a mobile coop you want, or how big of a building you want. If you are moving your coop every day, you can increase the density. I know commercial growers, and I'm just saying like the really big farms, I know that they're at about 2 square feet per duck, I think, indoors. That seems pretty tight, but that's what they do. So if you had a mobile coop that you're moving every day, you might be able to get away with that. These are pictures my dad took of a colony, I think in either Montana or North Dakota. This is all the same farm. So they start them inside, and then they eventually move them outside. Nutrition, pictured here, 3 types of feeds that are crushed up differently. We have a mash, a crumble, and a pellet. Never feed waterfowl mash, because for them, they eat and they drink and they eat and they drink, and it would cause their mouth to get so dry, and then they go straight to the water. It just is not recommended by anybody to use mash for waterfowl. Start them with a crumble, definitely, and then after 3 weeks, you can move to a pellet if you want. We do, but you could also keep it as a crumble. And then once you see the first egg laid, that's when you want to move to a layer. Okay, so that could be 20 weeks, 22 weeks, 18 weeks. It all kind of changes. There could be a whole class on nutrition. If you wanted more information, you can go to our website, or I have some books at the end of this presentation that talk more about nutrition. But again, this is all stuff you're going to have to figure out before you get your baby ducks in the mail or from your feed store or wherever you're planning to get them. It's very important. Okay, egg washing is a pain. And anybody that has ducks that are laying eggs knows that. I don't know of anybody that's found the perfect solution. We definitely have not. The more bedding you put in, the cleaner the eggs are going to be, but they still, for us at least, they still seem to get stained a lot, and you can't soak them out of the same, or it takes scrubbing and scrubbing, and that takes time and labor and money. So you can, again, machine versus hand, those are things to consider. The bottom left is, it's called a Sand and Touch, and that seems to be what a lot of people are using for both duck and chicken eggs at medium-sized farms. The one in the middle is just one I found on the internet that looks cool. I've never used it. Cool, also the KUHL. It's on the right one, the big bucket. They make a lot of egg washers too. This is just one that soaks the eggs. For detergent, we use something that's called liquid egg and tray wash. That's what we use. That's just what we are recommended by our vet store. The store supplies us all of our cleaning chemicals and all that. Egg wash powder is another option if you're soaking the eggs. And then another problem with duck eggs is packaging. You're not going to find good duck egg packaging unless you, well, I guess maybe for Khaki Campbell, because their eggs are smaller, you can get away with using jumbo chicken egg cases or cartons. But other than that, it's going to be difficult. I know Europe has some egg packaging for duck eggs, but that's hard to get them over here. Yeah, I think one of the great things about duck eggs and things that makes them stand apart from chicken eggs is their size. So I don't know. I mean, it's up to you if you want to reduce the size to the same size as a chicken egg, but then you don't have the novelty of a duck egg, and that's kind of what people expect is a larger egg. So find your packaging before you get your ducks. Okay, meat processing. This is a big one that everybody is searching for, meat processors. I think a lot more people would grow ducks for meat if they had somebody that will process them. That's just anecdotal, me talking to lots of people at the Pasture Poultry Conference. I know that my dad gets calls all the time about where to get ducks processed. Here in California, there is one. It's called Gramad. They're in Stockton, and they will process ducks for people. But unless you want to do them on your farm or on your ranch, you better be sure to find a processor before you get your ducks, because a lot of places that process chickens aren't going to do ducks. And if they do ducks, some of them are going to charge a lot of money because it takes them a lot longer to process a duck than a chicken. That's just because it's harder to get the feathers out if you don't take them to the processing facility at the right time. So basically, you want to take the ducks in for processing right, not when they're molting, but between molts, when they have all their feathers, so that it's easy to pluck them out. There's not new little feathers growing as you're plucking, because those pin feathers are difficult to get. Each state is different with how many ducks or chickens you can process at your farm. So that's something that you'll have to look into for wherever you are. This is another colony, an example of outside processing, and then another picture of inside processing, or processing at a company that does that. Marketing. I wasn't told to focus on marketing with this talk, but I think this is the most important part. If you're going to raise birds commercially and you want to sell them and make money, marketing is the most important. You can find more people that can grow ducks. It's about people that can market them. And so you need to spend time figuring out who your customer is, restaurants, farmers markets, retail stores, and don't try to make your price comparable to what you see in the grocery store. You're not producing a duck that, just any type of duck at the grocery store. You should demand a higher price. And when you're budgeting, a common mistake is to, your profit is your wage, and you should figure out what your wage is and put that in your budget. Okay, you don't work for free, and then you get whatever profit at the end of the day. Figure out how much your time's worth. If it's $15, $20, put that in your budget. Far too often do people not budget their wage, and then they just take whatever the profit is at the end of the day, and they've worked way more hours than they're profiting. So definitely put your wage in there. You're not free. You can dive into social media and all that. I have a picture of another colony. My dad's been to a lot of colonies, and people like pictures of little kids and baby ducks. So that's my advice for marketing. Resources, like I said, APA, great resource. Everybody there is willing to help everybody else. I think it's super neat that one farmer will find an awesome technique for raising chickens, and they will tell everybody about it at the conference. Everybody there is a team, and everybody there has the same mentality, which is what people have here and that are listening to this webinar about pasture poultry. And so people are there to raise the status of pasture poultry, to make it more known and to make it profitable, because they're not all doing it just for fun. They're making a living out of it, and they want everybody else to as well. You can go to our website. There's a lot of information there about nutrition, lighting. If you're wanting to grow ducks for meat or geese for meat, or sections on egg production, there's just good information there. And then I asked my dad what books he recommends for somebody that wants to get into duck farming, either for meat or egg laying. And these were the 3 books that he recommended. He's read a lot of them, so I would take his recommendation. That's an overview of all the topics of waterfowl that I could think of. I didn't really tell you how to do every single one of those steps, but at least hopefully I've made you aware of what's important and what you need to figure out before you get your ducks. If there's any questions, I can take questions. If not, then that's it. Yes.
I have a question. You said for meat processing of birds for the ducks, 7 to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Is that, it's 7 or 12?
Yeah, 7.
Is that true for both barn raised and pasture raised?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we've taken our birds in, the USDA has a fit about the pin feathers, and we're always in trouble at Vermont for
And when do you take them in?
that. 7 weeks.
Yeah, it may be 7.5, but it's 7 weeks is pretty dead on of what. So we don't process ducks for meat, but that's what we're hearing from our customers, and then we get our breeding stock. So the parent stock from Grimaud, which is a breeder in France, and that's their recommendation too. Yeah. In regards to the 7 versus 12 weeks, what at the Pasture Poultry Conference, I was talking to some people. They do the 12 weeks just because they can't get the bird big enough for chefs. So they're keeping them longer. They're putting more money into them, but they're getting the bird that the chefs want. The chefs want a bigger bird. So you know that goes back to knowing your customer. But yeah, to answer your question, it's 7 or 12, not 7 through 12. Yeah.
We had a couple of questions online. One was just following up with that,
Okay.
which was, what again was the justification of the 7 versus 12? Is that the time between, right?
Yeah, that's the
molt, is that?
Yeah, that's basically right between the 2 molts.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
And then the other question was the calorie numbers that you had on like the 2,900, the 3,000, is that per kilogram? Yeah, that one. Is that per kilogram of feed?
That's, what did I have? I will get back to them
Okay.
in 5 minutes.
I think that's, if I had to guess, I think that's what it is, but confirm for us when you get a chance. That's all the questions we had online.
All right.
Any more from the audience? Thank you again.